thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for joining a talk on security this early. Well, today we're going to look at learning about how JDK Flight Recorder, JDK Mission Control, and JFR security events can help with monitoring your Java application security and maybe help you detect some potential safety risks. Now, the title was pretty long. My last name is also long, so I decided to make a separate slide about myself and to introduce myself to you. Well, probably some of you might already know me. I'm Anna. I'm currently working as a Java developer advocate at Oracle in the Java team. I enjoy to work with the JDK tools, hence the talk of today. And I enjoy also to work with containers, Kubernetes, and other stuff on the side. So pretty much connecting the Java world with other worlds as well when I am working. And, well, in the talk of today, we're going to touch a few aspects about the JDK tools, but you can ask me more and find out more from what I'm posting from the socials. I'm not an active social media person. I'm just only posting when I have meaningful things to say regarding Java or other technologies or something that I discovered and I feel it's relevant. So that's not a disturbing account, so to speak. But you can follow me there on X or on Mastodon, and from time to time there are news on tutorials and stuff that I do or my colleagues in the Java team do. So I don't want to bore you with a lot with my presentation, just to let you know that the code show today and the slides will be shared at the end of the session, also with some useful links where you can learn more. So it's all going to be given to you. It's not just demo today and that's it. That's where it ends. And I assume, since you're here, that probably some of you have heard about JDK Flight Recorder. Can you please raise your hand if you've heard about the JDK Flight Recorder? Yes, we have a full room that knows about JDK Flight Recorder. That's great. So, as you know, JFR can help you with finding out what's going on with your application and the underlying JVM when that one is running. And it's a great tool for profiling your application. And we end up going for profiling when we sometimes have issues, or we think that we have issues, and it'd be good to investigate some suspect behavior, right? But what's important to know about JFR is that the recording, the way that the recording is being done is done in chunks. So the information that is being captured by JFR is done in chunks, and a chunk contains all the information necessary for parsing. Now, a chunk typically contains events that are useful when troubleshooting. And this is pretty much, in general, how a JFR event looks like. So pretty much, and probably you've seen this if you worked with JFR, you've seen that has an ID, has a timestamp, a duration of that event, a thread ID, a stack trace ID to help you connect where it was triggered, and of course, more payload, which can be more fields or less fields. It depends on that specific event. Now, the way that events are being written in those chunks, and in the end they end up being in the JFR files, is relevant because, well, that JFR file can contain also metadata information describing how to interpret these events and also how to resolve preceding events. So it's not just a dump of events and that's it. It's like a log file. There's a connection between those events and that helps other tools to look into it as well. Now, the specific session of today is about security, so we're going to talk about the JFR security events. So the JFR security events, we're going to use them in the demos. So these are the 6 JFR security events that we have at the moment. And I just listed them in the slide based on the time that they were introduced, available in the JDK. So starting with JDK 12, there were 4 events that were available specifically for security, all of them disabled by default. And in the slide there, you can see them like JDK security property modification for recording calls when your application dynamically changes a security property. One for TLS handshake, so for supervising successful TLS handshakes and recording information about that. And 2 of them connected to the X509 certificates, one for recording details of the X509 certificates that are in use by your application, and the other one recording the successful validation of those certificates So the entire validation chain that it goes through to validate that certificate that you are having in your application. Now, these events appeared in JDK 12, but also they were backported to 8 and 11. That's why you have the backports over there. And, of course, later on in JDK 20, we had 2 more events that were added to this landscape, and that was one on initial security property for showing the initial security property that your application is using. That one is the only one from these 6 that is enabled by default in the default.gfc or profile.gfc files that are shipped with each JDK. And of course, there's another one on security provider service that is looking on recording the provider method invocation done by your application. So these are the 3. And of course, again, they were backported to 17, 11, and 8. So that's pretty much the events part that we're going to look into today. And of course, I need to tell you about the demo. Well, it's morning, so thought to have a little fun because I'm going to have fun with you as well a little later on in the presentation. So we're going to play a little later tic-tac-toe together. But for the first part of the demo, I'm going to use a Spring Boot application. Of course, we're going to play tic-tac-toe with it. And because we're in the context of security, and we are thinking of security, well, not the regular HTTP security, but of course we're thinking about HTTPS, and we would like to work with certificates and TLS handshakes and so on. Of course, my application has HTTPS enabled. It uses certificates. It has a key store, a trust store. I would like for it to use mutual TLS. That's why the 2 of them there. And of course, as an end user, I need to provide a certificate so that I can firstly access my application and then go through all the steps of playing tic-tac-toe in the end. Now, my Spring Boot application is using a in-memory database, so I didn't pay a lot of attention to that one. I didn't care that much about storing data, and I'm not offended that much about losing it when I'm restarting my app. So I just want to demo the security part of it. But I also thought in the future, okay, so I want to monitor this with JDK tools, but maybe I want to deploy this somewhere else as well. So for myself to be prepared a little bit more for the future and for some other demos, thinking about, okay, I'm going to deploy it in a container because containers are cool, right? So if containers are cool, I need for my certificate, which is self-signed, to also be okay with the fact that it's going to be in a container. Hence, that extension there for my self-signed certificate authority certificate, which allows 2 types of DNS. The first one is localhost, obviously for my localhost. And the second one has the name of my container service, so it's going to be Spring Boot. So in the case that's going to be in a container, it's going to be fine with that container called Spring Boot. And of course, there's an IP for the local host, just for the local host's sake, so that it's there and enabled on my alt names. Okay, so let's see the demo. And let's see the application and how security works with it. Let's go to the IDE and just lower this one. So the typical Spring Boot application with some controllers, with some startup. It uses Timeleaf because, well, I'm a great UI developer. So I use Timeleaf for my own, for the rapidity of doing things. But what is important for us for this session is how did I configure the security part, right? So let's go to the security part. As I said earlier, let me make this a little bit bigger. I love this feature. So, first part, no more 8080. I preferred 8443. So it's going to be on HTTPS. That's done something with application name, MySQL, of course. There's some endpoints here because at some point I want to connect and maybe share some of my metrics to Prometheus. So I want to enable the metrics as well. And I just left a little bit the defaults for the metrics. But the important part, security, right? So that's why we're gathered here. Now, for the security part, as I'm using one of the latest versions of Spring Boot available there, I went for the new and cool SSL bundles. So I configured security using an SSL bundle, and that made my life a little bit more easier in terms of configuration. So for example, I named my bundle game, and I can have multiple bundles in a Spring application, name them differently if I want to change a few things and use different types of security. But for this case, where I just need a key store and a trust store, I just gave my name for game there. And I had to say, okay, where's the key store? Well, for the bundle game, my key store, it's going to be in the stores folder, keystore.p12. That's the name. Then I gave a password for my key store. Now you can see that's in clear. That's for the demo purpose, so that you know what I'm typing at some point in time. It's not meant for other reasons, just for demo. And also it's the old way of working with change it. Nowadays, the key store doesn't need a password anymore. I mean, the default key store in Java at least doesn't need a password. And then, well, I need a type for my key store, maybe to say it's type, obviously based on the extension. You can guess which type it is. Then there I have a key for my certificate, and it's called, well, I said the alias could be localhost, and again, the obvious password of change it. Because I said I need mutual TLS. Well, I had to enable it here with client authentication on need. And then I continue to say where my trust store is, and of course, the password to my trust store. So pretty much I kept it with the same password, which I know is a bad practice in terms of security, but not to bore you along. For demo, it works. So it works, it's good. Let's go along with it. So the application is up and is good, is all set up. Now what options I have there to look into the security of my application if I want to see what are its properties. Now, as a Java developer, when I'm running my application, what I'm normally doing, I'm having a JDK set up, right? In my case, Java 23. Let me just go and say, where's the VM? I want to add some VM options. Okay. And then to inspect it, well, there are a few options. So first of all, if I want to inspect the properties that are coming with the JDK in the security properties file, which is the static way of defining your security properties and modifying them, that's where something I can do and say -d java.security.properties. No, sorry, the security.debug equal properties. So that's one way to do it. But so, and this will show me the initial security properties that I have from my JDK, or if you're running in a container that, let's say, has a specific image tailored and it's smaller and a custom runtime, and maybe somebody modified those security policies and those security initial properties, you can find out on debugging those with this value. Now, with JDK 22, what happened? There was another option added for us as developers to look at these properties. And that one is called Xshow Settings Security. And it was backported, by the way, to Oracle JDK 21, 17, 11, and 8. So it was also backported, it's not just 22 onwards. What is the difference between the two, right? Both of them are showing the security properties, initial security properties. Well, as the name says for the first one is going to be more verbose. So it's useful for debugging, and it's going to tell you more information when you are debugging. The other one is more for the environments where you just want to get only the essential information. It's going to give you only essential stuff. For debugging purposes, the first one is going to help you. Now let's not clutter things and allow only the old one, because maybe we're familiar with that one. Okay, so this is for the properties. But what about TLS? For TLS, there's another way to do that when you're starting your application and say -d javax.net.debug SSL handshake. So this little thing helps you looking into the TLS handshakes that occur with your application. Either if they're great or doing well, or not. So, and that's pretty important. If maybe somebody, in the case of mutual TLS authentication, is providing you, let's say, a certificate that is not accepted by the server, that is going to be also digested and seen with this property. So now we have the application. Let's apply. Okay, let's run the app. So the application is great, lovely, started, shows the security properties. But I'm going to interact with my application, right? So I'm going to keep this in the logs. More users are going to interact with my application. So the logs will grow. And then I have to search, and then I need a service that looks into the logs and gets me all the information that I need. And maybe there's some security team that doesn't like this much verbosity, even though that I need to debug as a Java developer, right? So then you're thinking, but I need also to investigate, and maybe I can use JFR. But the application is already up and running, right? And while, restarting the application to add a flag can sound tempting, we can also use JFR for already running application. So how to do that? Let me just go and, sorry. Here, and let's configure JFR. Now, if I want to check let's say, how my security property is modified, that is disabled by default, so I have to enable it, right? So first of all, I want to make sure that I'm running with Java 23, and secondly, I need to, use JFR. So what I can do, say, Java home bin JFR configure, and I can say JDK. And I can say my property exactly. So JDK security property modification. And of course, I need to enable it. But to do that, I have to add this sign and say enabled true. And you can add more values to it. I mean, properties sometimes have more attributes, and you can just add another one and configure more attributes. But in this case, we just want to enable it. So we're just going to run this. What happens in this case, you can see that configuration was written to a custom.gfc. So what occurred is that JFR took over from my default.gfc configurations from the JDK and changed that configuration that I said there. But it didn't overwrite my default. It created another file with the specified configuration that I said, right? So it's not overwriting the entire JDK default configuration. Because, yeah, maybe you might want to do it. Maybe you want to reuse it for another purpose in the future. Okay, so let's search for security property modification. Okay, so it's enabled. Let's just go a little bit further and enable all of them. Okay, true, all of them are enabled now, all 6 of them. Good, now we can use JFR on our running application, and how can do that? Well, I'm running on local, I'm gonna cheat a bit. We're gonna use JPS to find out the ID of my app. And then I'm gonna say JCMD, the ID of my app, JFR.start. Then I need to say the settings for my start, right? So custom.jfc. What else? I need a duration. Okay, let's say 60 seconds. Let's not go overboard with it. And where I want to profile, well, it's going to be a very nice name, rectls.jfr. And now the recording started on my running application, which is running. So let's go to the browser and talk to it. 8443. Yes. The beauty of having a YubiKey is that's going to do this. Come on, allow me to work. Yeah, I'm just going to ignore you. Okay, I need to use HTTPS. At some point, it's going to give up. I hope. Yeah, it's good. So it didn't allow me to log in, because I said it's mutual TLS, right? So what it means, I just need to add a certificate for myself. Leave me alone. Yes. Sometimes you want to do that with a local security. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. I want to work. So I gave my certificate to this one. Oh, fine. Again. Yeah. And then the browser is going to be blocked. And it's going to be fun. Let me be. I entered the browser. Okay. Oh, advanced security risk. Okay. Yeah. There's a security risk because it's self-signed certificate. I know. I accept the risk and I continue. Leave me alone. I want to see my application. Oh, this is annoying. How can you do this to me now when I want to demo my app? I want. Okay, so maybe I didn't import it because I was so in a hurry with that. Okay. I need the password. The obvious, change it. Finally, yes. Don't tell me that I just take out the YubiKey. This is my client certificate, and I just unchecked that for a reason. I say OK. I say OK again, so 2 times I have my TLS. I don't have a user yet. I can register. I can sign in. OK, and now I can play. Good. And I hope I captured something with the TLS while I was haggling with the YubiKey. Because I said 60 seconds, and who knows if I managed to do a recording in 60 seconds. So I have a rec TLS. I have something in it. Okay, let's check if I have my TLS event in it. Okay, so how do I find out the TLS event with it? Again, JFR can help me with it. So I can go and say Java home bin JFR print -- events. Show me TLS, whichever you captured there. Hopefully it captured rectls.jfr. No, because I have something saved for times of need. If I wouldn't have haggled with that. But I'm going to show you all in the remote one the same thing, so don't worry. So normally what happened is that there were 2 times that I have accepted the certificate. So this means 2 TLS handshakes that went over there. And what this means is that they are pretty much being captured with this event being enabled. So I didn't set any threshold, they were both captured. But I want to show you also what was, here captured. A lot of logs, of course, in the application, as always. And I'm going to search for server hello. So when the TLS handshake is going on, regardless if it's successful or not, there's a server hello being emitted from the server side upon the browser's request, right? And this is what is being captured in the logs, in a very nice JSON. So it says here server version TLS version 1.2, and it also speaks about selected version 1.3. Who here thinks that the server end up going with TLS version 1.2 in the handshake? Please raise your hand. Just wild guess. You think it went with 1.2? Good. Everybody guessed correctly, I hope. And they were not doubting. So in the end, the server went with 1.3. And the explanation for the 1.2 is coming in a moment. Now, browsers, what they are doing, when they're going, they're like set with minimal version 1.2 of TLS to work. So when the handshake is initiated, the browser says, hey, I need to work with you. I need minimum version of TLS 1.2 to work with. And what the server says, that's fine with me, but I prefer 1.3 because, yeah, you also like 1.3, so let's go with 1.3 together. So they end up working with 1.3. Now, there can be situations where your application cannot, I know for some reasons, go with TLS version 1.3 and use that one. But the reason why I showed you this is because sometimes developers find confusing understanding which version was used based just on the logs. And it can be confusing, so yes, somebody said in the front, it is confusing. It's true. While the JFR event just said protocol version 1.3, that's what we used, that's what was captured, that's what we are going to have there. Now, because it's on local host, there's no peer host, so there's no peer port, but in a proper environment with a DNS, with the port configured, those are being captured as well. And it's pretty useful. And also it's very nice to know which cipher suits is being used in the TLS exchange, as probably some of you might read the release notes of the JDKs, and some cipher suits are not considered that safe as security advances, and they can become disabled or legacy. So it's good to keep an eye on what you're using in your handshakes or in your security properties, or what you changed within your security properties, so you don't end up with using some legacy or disabled cipher suit. So that's pretty much this part. But let's take this up to container. And I said I want to deploy it somewhere else. So for deploying somewhere else, I also need to go and use maybe a Docker file, because I'm going to use containers. And for containers, for containerize my application, I use Glink to make my minimal runtime. I said, for those moments when I'm in doubt as a developer, and I am there and just me and myself and the container and the black Vim, I want to be able to go and have JFR, just to use it, and that's why the module is included. And for those even darker moments when I want to go to my container, and maybe I'm using JMX, I want to be able to connect to JFR via JMX, and JDK management.jfr helps me with that too. And then I use my very nice defined Java runtime from the previous stage to set it up, so minimal container runtime. There's my jar, it's up and running. And the easiest way to show deployment on local when there's flaky internet connection is using your Docker Compose. So I have here my Spring Boot. Remember the Spring Boot in the custom certificate name? That's the service name here, so that the certificate is okay with it. So I have my Spring Boot that is for my container. I'm always going to build from the Docker file that I showed you earlier. Container name, just to make sure, Spring Boot. And I want to set up my application for continuous recording. But I want to use my custom GFC, the one I used earlier, so that you don't say that I am trying to do other stuff that are not okay. So I'm going to use my custom GFC. Let's record with it. And yeah, I need probably when I'm going to deploy, I can also have a key store and a trust store that are going to be from somewhere, from a volume, I don't know. I can attach them as volumes. Well, I said I want to use GMX, so I configured GMX remote with some access, so what users are there available for me to access my application via GMX, what passwords they have, what ports are available for my application. Now, 8443 for the HTTPS, obvious. And for the times of GMX, 1099, that's what I said. And maybe I want to export my metrics and see how my metrics are working in that situation, just to check up. So I have configured a bit Prometheus as well. Now let's go and start this up. Docker compose app --build. Okay, so let's start the service. I'm hoping that the internet is going great here. Seems to be starting. Ooh. Yes, good. So for this one, I forgot to configure something, to start something for today's presentation, which is going to be JMC. Local. Luckily, it starts pretty fast. Okay, this is. Come on. Let me make this bigger. And if I remember correctly, used to be a command or something that I could use to enhance my. Anyway, probably my laptop forgot to use the command to focus on my screen, but it's okay. So from GMC, I'm just going to connect to my remote app. And I'm going to create a new connection, a local host on 1099. So I'm going to use GMC with a JMX like the old ways. I'm going to use my admin user. Sorry for the small things. Very safe password of pass1. Test the connection. It's all good. It's going to be next. Start flight recording. Now, when I'm connecting here, because I'm connecting remotely, I can use my, and maybe I don't want to use that custom that I did earlier. I can also have my custom set from here. So just I'm going to go next with the last one that I had. Checking the security properties just to make sure that they're enabled, all of them. And finish. And the recording started. Now let's quickly go to the browser where hopefully I'm not going to be annoyed again with passwords. Okay, so localhost 8443, login. Okay, so again, one. Let me see. Oh yeah, I have to register again because I'm in a container and it's a different application than the one earlier, so I need to register again. I told you. In-memory database forgets you easily whenever you restart your app. So again, being asked, okay, so you wanted me to use this? Yes, I want to use this. Now let's play again. Cool. And that should be almost enough. So the recording is at 83%. Sorry, I'm exactly standing in front of the recording. I know. 90. Okay, perfect. I'm using, by the way, the latest JDK Mission Control, which I can tell you it's quite good. And it has more stuff than the previous one. Good, so now that I got my recording, let's check the TLS. Why I'm searching for TLS? Because I want to make sure that I capture the 2 successful TLS handshake. Every time that I said yes, yes, there's a handshake that happened there, and that was captured. So it's pretty much the UI version of what I showed you earlier with the JFR print. But there are also some other events. So for every TLS handshake, there was an exchange of certificates going on there. So my certificate, the one that I have as a client, went down, was validated, was all good about it. There's a certificate ID, position, and so on in the validation counter that happened there. And of course, there's a connection with the thread. These are very important details, especially the event thread, because you can connect the details of the X509 certificate based on thread, for example, and you can just know which details belong to which validation and so on and so forth. Now, for X509 certificate details, as I said in the beginning, payloads differ, so this is why the payloads here are way bigger. What this means is that you get signature algorithms for your certificate. You get also the key length of for your key that is used by that certificate, serial number, helps you a lot with identifying which certificates are in use. And also it can tell you when is valid from and until when is valid. These are very important aspects to know about your application. And they are all captured with this event. So, and you can also use JFR print as well, and it will show you the same stuff and so on and so forth. And you can correlate this even further with other JFR events. Look at the nice graphs in JMC and have much more comprehensive view of what's going on with your application overall. They showed you a lot of stuff, and some of them are very sensitive. So what happens if sensitive data gets in that profile, in that profiling recorded file, in that recording file.jfr. So in that case, you can scrub it. And there's JFR scrub command for that. So what you can do, you can filter for that recording with JFR scrub. You can supply each events you want to include, and you can include a category and exclude events from that. So it's pretty powerful, and pretty much it's not that known, but is useful in case something slipped and is sensitive in a profile, even when you're profiling an application. So please remember this one. Okay, but what I showed you earlier, I showed you an application running in a container in Docker Compose. I connected via GMX. That's pretty much the old way of working, meaning the way of working until JDK 16, when that was the way to go with profiling remotely via GMC. Now, after JDK 16, you can use the JFR events and stream them. And it's way better to work than just have this GMX setup, complex things to connect, and then you go and haggle with maybe your security team and say, hey, please open up 1099 for me, because I really need it for those times of need. And yeah, hopefully it happens, hopefully not. So for the case that your application is still using GMX, but you want to stream those events, then you can still use GMX. It's not a bad idea, but some teams, what they prefer is to have an application where they are connecting to the other one, and they proxy their events, and then they're reading from that repository, from that proxied repository of events. They are, aggregating all of that together and then sharing it to Prometheus or whatever you have for metrics inspection on events. So that's one way to do it. And this one says it's a way of actively monitoring your application. The reason is because you're doing here the new remote recording stream. So you are doing a new remote recording stream. You're doing this actively on the application, but you're doing it out of the process. You're not actually doing it on this application that runs this code. You're doing it for the application that's available at that URL there. So it's out of that process applications. Now, similar, you can have passive monitoring. So what passive monitoring is done out of the process, you are having those chunks of JFR continuously monitoring running, those chunks of things. And when you're continuously monitoring and you're specifying a repository for the chunks of recordings, working in containers, volumes, and other stuff, you can have the path to that specified. Look at those recorded files there, and then get information from that one too. So this is another way to do it, but this is like more the passive way of doing it when you're out of the process of the application. So another way of working. Third one, streaming JFR events actively. So this means actively, but in the process. So being active in the process that they occur, the same application that those occur. So in that thing, what you're doing a new recording streaming. And when you're capturing an event, you're building a metrics for that event, like in this case of Gosh, and you're shipping that to the metrics registry of your choice, Prometheus, or whatever you have connected to your application to register your events. And the fourth one, finally, streaming JFR events passively within the process. So the fourth option, which is actually my preferred option for the demo today, was to open the current repository of my application, do a passive registration of it, and in the same process. And again, the same code. The only difference is that I'm doing the event stream open repositories in the passive way of getting access to the events that are emitted by my tic-tac-toe app. So with this in mind, I evolved my demo. And because I had to deploy it, I wanted to deploy it in the cloud. I ran Podman Compose to do that in an Oracle Cloud instance, which is a virtual machine. And then I realized that if I want to play with you tic-tac-toe, it's tough to share with you a certificate so that you can authenticate. So I removed the mutual TLS part just for the sake of the demo. I kept the HTTPS and the key store and stuff like that. I can still work with monitoring tools like the JDK tools. I can still work with Prometheus. That's what I'm going to show to you. I can connect it to other services like the Java Management Service, which is pretty cool because it can advise me on what other flags that can help with my application performance I can set. So I can connect it with lots of stuff in the cloud. That's awesome, right? And without further ado, let's play and observe. Hope you can scan this. Is visible. Now, because I still work with a self-signed certificate, please accept. It's not a malware. I know I could have went through the trouble of validating the actual certificate and make it real and so on and so forth. But yeah. But I also want you to be able to replicate it. So the repo at the end has all the steps on how I set up the certificates and all this stuff. So yeah, I prefer for you to have a replicated way of working as well. So yeah, and while you are playing, let me go to the browser. So I use Podman Compose because, yeah, well, I still have that Docker Compose. I could use that Docker Compose. Isn't it great? And well, I put it there. It runs my Prometheus, my provisional Prometheus, in the same location. And if I am to inspect my events in the past 5 minutes, so to speak, because I am, for example, streaming how many successful JDK TLS handshake totals occurred, as you can see, there was a certain number, a certain threshold. And when I told you to scan and start to play, they kind of groaned. So hopefully many of you managed to log in and to play. And somebody gave me the feedback, it's too easy, I always win. Yeah, well, it was intentional, I would say. It was intentional. Let's feel good together. Just started the conference, so why not? Okay, so you can look at those events that I was showing earlier. I mean, there was a gauge, there was in this case, it's a counter that I am looking here. So you can have those metrics that you're collecting on events gathered in Prometheus and look at different aspects of that, have averages, look at how they spawned over time, and connect them with other information from your infrastructure so that you know more about your application and what's going on with your application, but together with the security settings that you're having. So I don't want to go too much overboard with the presentation. More. So more information. We have a security section on dev.java that we hope to have spawned and have it even with more information in the upcoming weeks and months. So dev.java contains tutorials on relevant things that are going on in Java. We're mostly looking into publishing tutorials on final features. But we also want to keep you updated with what's going on latest in Java. So that's inside.java. That's where you can read some research, some very interesting articles on what's going on with Java computation processing and, well, influence of that in AI, which was a recent article that one of my colleagues wrote there. We also have videos on youtube.java, so we're also publishing videos on security and other topics related to Java as well. And as I said, there are links, and there's going to be a QR code to the slides, because I don't want you to feel bad that you couldn't capture all this and then go to that and just lose the link. All the links are providing how I made my setup, so even the infrastructure setup is being detailed. I have kept everything opened, so it can be reproduced, and you can tell me, this doesn't work for me, it's good, so that I know that people are trying, and I can help you with setting it up if you're having any issues in setting it up. So this is where the slides are. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm looking forward to your questions. I don't know how much time I have for questions, but we can speak outside so that I don't take too much time for the next speaker if I'm taking too much time now. Thank you.